Why, hello everyone. It is me, your friendly neighborhood Jdawg Cosplay here with a little Halloween video for you. Now, as you all know, it is Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, where the layer between good and evil is at its thinnest, and evil roams. And also some people like to dress up just to get candy. Regardless, today, I have a little special surprise for you. As you can see by me in front of a campfire, using a dramatic voice, you can tell that this is going to be a little spooky. So, what I plan to do here is read a little subreddits called No Sleep. Read about one or two of those. And also I might do a little thing where I'm just handing out candy to trick-or-treaters, because that's what I'm doing tonight. And now back to the dark and the creepy. This first one is titled, I run an animal rescue, but really weird things have been happening lately. Let us give it a read. Prepare yourselves. It might be very spooky. I lost my daughter on October 31st, 2011. I hadn't even known I was pregnant. So imagine the shock. Blood and foul, cloudy fluid spilled from me and pooled across the floor. I was horrifying. Somehow in my head, it's eternal, never ending. I'll always be there in that moment, trapped by the smell and the sight of as pain forced me to my knees. My neighbor heard my scream and called emergency services. I suppose if it hadn't been for him, I'd be dead. I never even thanked them. Everything could have gone wrong with my child. Everything that could have been wrong, went wrong. The doctor gave me the details. I blocked out all of them except one. By the time my body tried to expel her, she had been dead for days. Her little body twisted, up and bloated. Necrorizing was the worst thing I'd seen. Didn't even feel it at first. It made sense. I hadn't even known she existed. I never wanted kids. She had been the product of an assault anyway. It happened at church. I didn't know what to do, so I just did as he said and prayed until it was over. Except it never was. I would always be in that dusty corner behind the chapel stage, gritting my teeth against the pain and struggling to lose myself in the colored mural overhead. I was one of those dumbasses who thought you couldn't get pregnant your first time, so the possibility of a child didn't even cross my mind until she was dead and gone. I thought I was okay after the stillbirth. I never wanted her. I hadn't even been aware of her, so I didn't mourn her until New Year's Eve. I was alone, drinking martinis like any good old teetotaler. All at once, I realized my face felt wet. Suddenly, it was hard to breathe. I touched my cheeks and felt fear. My chest began to heave. Everything from my throat to being too tight, too big, and terribly sore to my guts, hollow and endless and under assault, like a gale force of wind had sweeping through my body. It hurt. Some might describe it as a dam breaking, but no. It was like I was being butchered and crushed, but I could not die. So panic and sorrow and rage swept over me, alternating tides that vividly recalled the image of my own blood spurting across the floor. I lay there sobbing until I got up. Except I don't think I ever did. When things are too quiet, I'm too tired. I could feel the floorboards beneath me, that crushed, butchered sensation overwhelming me. I will always be on that creepy wooden floor, quivering, sobbing, and praying to die. But I didn't know that then. I washed my face and went for a walk. Halfway down, I found a litter of newborn kittens frozen to the ground. I pried them up one by one. Most of them were dead. One of them was half eaten. 4, however, were clearly alive. The rest of the morning passed in a cold, bright blur. I found a cat rescuer named Genevieve who came to meet me. She had access to the emergency vet. I'd waited in the vet's office. It was numb, silent, as Genevieve placed call after call looking for someone to foster these poor kittens. At the end, she swore and slammed the phone onto the counter. "I'll foster them," I finally said. "You'll have to feed them every hour. You'll have to wipe them down and rub their stomachs after they eat, the way a mama cat would lick them, or they won't ever digest their food." She had more instructions, more warnings. None of them fazed me, and I took them home. I took care of them as they grew into tawny tabbies with golden eyes, eventually removed all by one. A small boy with a persistent respiratory infection and clicky meow. I named him Bubbles because it was the snot bubbles he produced when he sneezed. I worked closely with Genevieve after that. Under her guidance, I went to school to be a veterinarian. Soon I branched out to other animals, like dogs, livestock, birds, and exotics. A couple of years later, I bought a little house in the desert and officially started my own rescue. It wasn't pretty. The room was small and cramped. Mint green paint coated the walls, giving everything a sickly cast. But it had 4 acres, beautiful windows, 3 bedrooms, one of which was just perfect for a medical room. So it was perfect. Animal rescuing is hard, endless, and thankless. Rile with conflict and senseless politics. The only reason you do it is because it is a calling. But I wouldn't change my calling for anything. But damn if I wouldn't switch out some of these other workers. This past year, I networked with a lady who fashioned herself as a dog rescuer. I had my doubts, but she was abrasive, incompetent, and reeked of ammonia and feces. But I played along and eventually got an invitation to a rescue. What I saw is one of the most haunting things I've ever come across, and I guess that's saying something. I called the police. She was arrested. The surviving animals were split among other animal control and various rescues. I received 1 of the 9 animals. 9 of the animals. That was a mistake on my part. It's very hard to read in this thing. 4 days later, her son lit my property on fire. 32 animals dead, including Bubbles. Part of me will always be on my knees, watching from an ambulance as fire consumed all the beautiful creatures I was supposed to protect. I returned 3 days later. All that remained was the back porch, the second frame of a back door. I settled myself against the beam and cried. Animal rescuing is expensive. It costs you everything. I didn't have money for a hotel or even a rental, so I pitched a tent on the ashes of my home and stayed. I dreamed of the house, of the rescue, all the dogs, cats, and birds I loved and healed and renamed. Those dreams faded into other, darker dreams. Dreams of the scorched black porch and murals of the chapel ceilings, the blood-soaked floorboards and dead children, of apocalyptic flame towering the star-skirted sky. On the 5th night, I woke from an awful nightmare. Visions lingered in my head. Deformed animals, burning babies, and a looming, incomprehensible monstrosity with a Cheshire cat grin. The tent felt claustrophobic. I stumbled out, fighting a surge of panicking gulps, deep lungfuls of crisp desert air. Just as I was ready to sleep again, a light flickered on behind me. Pale, sickly green light stretched across the sand, as if it were spilling from a door left ajar. For a bewildering instant, deja vu gripped me. I had seen that triangular shape and distinct green hue every time I opened my back door. I turned around. A light emanated from a partially collapsed doorway. The sight of familiar mint green walls and tile floors made me sob. The sound echoed across the desert like a gunshot. I ran to the door and swept my hand across the threshold, half expecting to spontaneously combust. Nothing. I peeked around the side door frame. Nothing but sand and ashes, swirling in the darkness. Something whined desperately past the door. The shrill, musical scale of an anxious dog. I took a deep breath and darted inside. Sunlight poured through every window. I spun around badly, disoriented, and fell. Saw the starlight desert through the back door. My tent waited for me. Fabric ripping in the wind. The whine came again. I grit my teeth and strode through the house. It was dirty, filthy, strewn with garbage, dirt, and dust. Graffiti covered the walls, and sage sprouted through the cracks on the floor. I reached the living room. Immediately my gut went cold and squirmy. A white chihuahua mixed there, or rather, half of him stood there. The front part of his body, horribly thin, skin crawling with parasites. It was more or less intact, but his hindquarters were gone, cut off or perhaps crushed away. A reminder of his spine, dragged out along the floor, gleaming in the daylight. The dog gave a happy little wiggle and crawled forward. I stumbled back and my foot sank into something painfully hot. I turned around and gasped. It was a cat. Charred tissue clung to its bones. Its ruined little chest heaved painfully, shallow and quick. Oh no, I breathed. It gave me crickety little meow and looked up. A familiar golden eye stared into my own. Bubbles. I scooped him up, oblivious of the scorched bones blistering my skin, and ran to the medical room. There was no hope, but I did everything I could anyway. Made of his scarred skin, antibiotics, splints, bandages, everything I had, I gave. Then I held him, and I cried. After a while, Bubbles squirmed in my arms, releasing the cricket-like meow, and began to chew at his bandages. No, I cried, swatted his little hands away. They keep changing. Bad burns seeped through liquid to soak the bandages. And damn if it wasn't the worst burn I had ever seen. I had removed them. It was whole, not perfect. It was scarred with missing patches of fur and half a tail, but he was healthy. He flicked his tail across my face and padded to the living room. I followed numbingly. Once again I froze. The white dog waited there. So did the other animals, birds, cats, dogs, and chinchillas, horses, cows, pigs, crowded in my living room, all sporting hideous injuries. Some, like the white dog, seemed almost okay. Others lay motionless upon the floor, struggling to breathe. Bleeding, rotting, burned, dismembered, skinned, abrased, crippled, infested, everything that could happen to an animal. Every horrific eventuality and nightmare waited for me in the living room. Bubbles meowed and pressed his head against the white dog. Bugs crawled through its white fur, lingering the position of spine before skittering back to safety. Bubbles looked at me expectingly. I scooped up the broken little dog and took him to the medical room and did everything I could. He healed into a rickety two-legged joy burrito. The little legs didn't slow him down. Within an hour, he was scooting off after Bubbles. Odd, it seemed, to the other broken animals. I worked until my supplies ran out. Once healed, the animals wandered out the front door. Outside was a small city, wrapped in a green paradise. Some of the animals entered houses, some went to the lush jungles to the west, and still others out in the green fields that still stretched from mountains into the distance. But there was more to help, so many more, and I had nothing to give them. So I exited through the back door into the familiar ash-strewn desert. I drove into town as the sun rose. When I got back, all that awaited me was an empty doorway. I felt drained, like God had pulled a plug in every part of me and rushed out into the sand. I clambered into my tent and slept. After a long, dark, battered in the sky, sticky green light, I tore into my tent and rushed to the house. Bubbles and the little light dog were waiting for me. I spent a long amount of time treating these animals, the rotted, starved, burned, and the mutilated. It took 3 days to treat all of these animals. I would have gone it done faster, but the doorway only opened after dark. When the last patient, a sleek black duck, waddled out of the front door, I sat down. The house was now in awful shape. Blood, pus, viscous coated the carpet. Mud, dirt, flowers, feces, leaves, dust, fur. It was filthier than I could possibly imagine. Even the walls were disgusting, splattered with blood and graffiti. The words were hardly visible in some places, obscured as if by various fluids. I stared blankly, willing my exhaustion away. After a while, I wasn't staring at graffiti. I was staring at dates. November 25th, 2003. May 27th, 1913. January 26th, 2010. October 20th, 1854. August 10th, 2000. January 25th, 2002. February 22nd, 1932. July 22nd, 2004. October 4th, 1951. November 12th, 1936. And so many more. Every patch of the wall featured some date or another. Looking at them made me feel unsettled, almost nauseous. I stood up, stuttering, inspected the house. Other than the fifth, I'd last seen it. The other additions were 2 spiral-bore notebooks on my desk, a green and a red. The green one was battered, a page full of fussily neat handwriting. I skimmed several pages and frowned, flipped back to the first. Hi, if you're reading this, sorry. There was a big book here once, but it got burned up. I only found the page with the rules, so this is your guidebook now. Here are the rules from this big book. When we're here, we help whoever we find needs our help. At first, the things that need our help will appear in the house. Help them no matter what. Even if you think you can't, you can. When they're better, make sure they leave through the front door. They can never go out the back. Oddly, you can never go out through the front door. Anywhere in the house is fine, anywhere out the back is fine, but never be able to leave through the front. Sometimes things that need help will knock on the front door. Let them in no matter what, and I mean no matter what. Give them what they need. They will leave when they leave. Sometimes these things will try to get out the back door. Stop them at all costs, even if you have to kill them. At some point, the back door won't take you home. It'll take you somewhere else. Don't be scared. Go through and you're going to see horrible things. The worst things. Don't worry. As long as you follow instructions, nothing can hurt you. When the back door takes you somewhere else, here's what you need to do. Find a living thing with the clearest aura. It's hard to explain, but you will know when you see it. Bring the thing back here and give it whatever it needs. Don't deviate ever. Brightest aura, period. Back to the house, no matter what. The last rule is keeping a record, so that what I'm doing with this notebook, don't forget to write one in yours. You don't have to write anything major. Think of it like a captain's log to help whatever comes next. Taylor. I just turned the page and something knocked on the front door. Bubbles ducked under the bed, the white dog hackles went up. I looked out the back door, my tent stood there, framed against the backdrop of the stairs. For a long, painful moment I thought about bolting. The knocking came again and more violently heavy. I had ridiculous mental images of the rude customer demanding to enter my store after closing. The knocking grew exponentially in strength and tempo until the entire house was shaking. Let them in, the notebook said. Let them in, no matter what. I steeled myself and marched toward the front door and shook in the frame, dislodging dust and splinters. Syrup sunset light was spilled through the windows, drenching everything in gold and crimson. The sight paralyzed me. It was beautiful and hideous, dreamlike and nightmarish. I reached out and opened the door. A tall man stood on the porch, dying light streamed behind him, obscuring his features. "May I?" His voice was a grouching whisper, thick and all. I stepped aside, crossed the threshold, and shut the door behind him. A hysterical smirk twisted my mouth. He had no eyes, quivering. They lay just under the skin, flickering this way, and like trapped fish, blood dribbled deep spirits from his lips. He raised his head and took a deep breath, holding it in for an odd amount of time. With a thrill of horror, I realized he was staring at the back door at my tent, ripping the night wind. "Can I help you?" I whispered. He twisted around and looped toward me, terribly fast and smooth. So, like a spider, shoved me against the front door. Quivering, fresh-coated stacks were hilarious and horrifying. I'm not sure whether to laugh or scream. He tangled his long, cold fingers in my hair and slammed my head into the door. Stars rocketed across my vision, brighter, even the light spreading through the windows. The man jabbed me and grabbed my throat. "Cut them out," he whispered, "or I will stay and stay and stay." His hand tightened with more repetition until I couldn't breathe. "Okay," I choked. His face pale and papery, marbled with veins, and black and dull, moody green filled. It felt awful, yet hilarious little protrusions stretched until they broke his skin, straining within millimeters of my cheek. Then released me and stepped away. "Hurry, they are growing." I led him to the medical room. "You need to lay down." My voice was gravelly and wet, not unlike his. He obeyed, settling himself against the steel table. Gooseflesh erupted from my skin upon contact, strange and mesmerizing. I snapped my latex gloves over my hands and inspected the wound. They squirmed wildly, sickening and fascinating all at once. I grabbed one and pinched the delicate flesh between my fingers. I grabbed a pair of medical scissors and snipped. The man roared as blood and green fluid exploded by a glistening mass. It slapped wetly against the tile floor and wriggled away with terrible speed. I tried to tissue, but the man grabbed me, telling me to finish. I did as he said, but less and less carefully this time. When I cut the other eye, it took part of the parasite with it, and he screamed. And so did the parasite. A keening head splitting wail flopped on the floor like a fish and smacked on it. I ran to the hall. I saw the worm, fat, pillowy, gleaming like 1,000 colors, squirming into the kitchen, towards the back door. A flash, tiny foot bolted across the kitchen, carrying a maggot with it. Screamed, mutilated, hideous screech that brought me to my knees. The white dog pressed against my side, warm, comforting. His bubbles snarled as the maggot screamed. All at once, the screech cut off. I looked up, ears ringing. Bubbles stood in the corner, panting. Blood sheeted from his flanks. Enormous maggots lay before him, reduced to a bloody mask. I darted forward and closed the back door. Bubbles uttered his crickety meow and collapsed. I rushed to him in the medical room. The eyeless man was waiting for me. Empty sockets, streaming pus, and I shoved him out of the way, put Bubbles in the place. "Help me," the man roared. "Help me now." I grabbed antibiotic ointment and squirted it all over carelessly into his sockets. I taped his skin together as quickly as I could and wrapped him in gauze and screamed, "Get out!" He walked away, leaving me with Bubbles. The white dog dragged itself into the room, whimpering. His head lay on my foot. I stitched and taped my poor cat back together and then waited. It took a long time, but finally Bubbles laughed himself to my lap. I laughed until I cried and then picked up the white dog and went to the kitchen. My heart immediately fell to the floor. The back door was wide open. Over the threshold, another graffiti date. October 21st, 2018. I closed the door and wandered into the living room, reading every date I could find, and finally made the connections. If you take any date on the wall, then count forward a year and a day, you will have a date of disaster. August 10th, 2000 became September 11th, 2001. May 27th, 1913 became June 28th, 1914. The assassination of Archduke Franz Friedrich, the point of no return for World War I. November 25th, 2003 became November 26th, 2004. The day of the Indian Ocean tsunami, which killed 250,000 people. Whenever something escapes this house, things go wrong. Wars, natural disasters, possible famines and genocides too. I have to find the eyeless man and bring him back. I don't know how. Help me, God, I don't know how. Well, that was creepy. Also odd, but creepy. Oh man, I'm actually really hot from standing behind this fire. So, thank you all for listening. And if you want to see me do like something like this again, maybe like a Christmas story for the holidays, let me know. And I'll just also post a video maybe tomorrow or the next day of me handing out candy. So, hope you guys enjoyed and have a very spooky and safe All Hallows Eve.